Consider supporting your favorite award-winning historian by going to the link below, which is called Teespring, and ordering yourself a t-shirt or a coffee mug or a fridge magnet. There's a discount code that I'll provide. Give it a look-see. Welcome to the Old History Project. I'm Dakota Carmichael, three-time award-winning historian here. You know, all three of my awards, they've been for historic structures, and it is an honor to be standing where I'm standing in this video today, in the historic Bethesda Church. The church was first organized in 1832 by a member of the NRHP Presbyterian Church, and it was built on land donated by a fellow named Joseph Shannon, who I believe was a pastor of the original St. Paul's Presbyterian Church. Which is a fun fact. The first church was built and organized by Joseph Hamilton Sr., first county clerk of Jefferson County. So there is a lot to cover about this church that I'll just sum up. It is entirely original to 1835. Everything in here is original. And before I tell you why, just know that during the Civil War, it was used as a general hospital for the Confederate troops. And now there were some names that came through here, and just one of them was one of the tallest soldiers in the Confederacy. He was Nathan Andrew Jackson. He was over 7 foot tall, and he's buried just out in the yard there. Members of the congregation, you see, in this area you had people that weren't loyal to the South, or to the Confederacy, we should say. But you had people that were loyal to the South in the Confederacy. Those people couldn't get over their differences, combined with the fact of what had happened in this church, all the blood that had been spilled and the division created between mother and father, brother and sister, father and son. They couldn't get over that, and they left the church in the 1870s, which is when the last congregation was held. Short period after that, after the turn of the 20th century, it was used as a smallpox hospital. And if you've read about smallpox, you'll know that was pretty deadly. The church was almost burned to the ground after all of that took place, but the Board of Trustees decided that they wanted to try and save the historic structure. It was going to be burned down. They took and bleached every square inch of this church to keep from having to burn it down. And boy, I'm glad they did. So there is no electricity in this church at all. And if you look around at all the pews, the floor, the stoves, the pulpit here, we're standing where so many people have stood before, historic and non-historic. Just to cover some of the families buried out there in the graveyard: Franklin W. Taylor, owner of the historic Greenwood Mansion, is buried in the yard. The Shannons, the Rogans, there's my people from Hayslope, all of the Rogan family is buried out there in the yard. Theophilus, Mary Catherine, and Mary Louisa Rogan, they're buried out there. So some of the Hale family and some of the Shields. So during the Civil War, in what was known as, I think it was Vaughn's or Gillen's stampede, somebody shot a cannonball, and it went all the way through the church. I think it passed through the east side of the church, went all the way through, and the structure was so severely weakened that they had to put these big iron bars across both sides of the church to keep it from falling over. Now that, in recent years, has been subject to debate, whether or not it could have just been old brick falling apart. I choose to believe it was a cannonball because with so much Civil War activity happening around us here, and some of those cannons had a range of between 2 and 5 miles, depending on how big it was. It's not exactly an outrageous thing to believe. So growing up in the small little town of Russellville and Whitesburg, going to Whitesburg Elementary and going to East Ridge Middle School, you know, word about different things gets spread around among school-age children. One of the most vivid urban legends, as I'll say, that got passed around was that there's a witch buried up here behind Russellville School. So those of you that are a little older on my viewer base will remember the website topics and the nightmare that was. So there was a picture on there of a grave that had a gold pentagram with the colors red, white, it was red, green, and blue, and that was sitting, it would sit around the star, and then some colors, or some symbols. And everybody believed it was a witch's, like the grave of a powerful witch. So come to find out, you know, years later, before they shut topics down, I looked that up, and the lady was actually a member of the Order of the Eastern Star, which was an organization created for the wives of Freemasons to take care of them and all that stuff. And this is where it was. So unfortunately you can no longer read that, but because people were so afraid of whatever those symbols were, those very scary Mason symbols, they tore them out of the stone. And now this may not have been her grave, it could have been somewhere else, but I myself remember them being here, because right up here you guys can see those stars there. I'm pretty sure the stars set somewhere in that vicinity. Whoever this is probably somebody's mom or maybe their wife. This is John Robert Long. He died in 1866. So, among many other prominent families who are put here in Bethesda Cemetery, you have the Taylors right there, some of the Boaz family right there. Their Bible actually stayed in the church during the Civil War, and the Nennys. And then, oddly enough, you'll find him in the cemetery every now and again, is Kelly Ford from the Longstreet Museum, here to tell us about the Nenny family.
Well, Patrick Nenny was the first Nenny to settle in this region in 1793. He passed away in 1824 and left the bulk of his land and his fortune to his son, Charles P. Nenny. And of course, Charles P. Nenny marries a Sarah Galbraith. In 1828, they settle in Russellville and build the house that we now call the Longstreet Museum. Unfortunately, Charles dies fairly young in 1857. He leaves a lot of his personal wealth to his son, Charles Jr., over there. Now, Charles Jr., he was a railroad agent in Russellville through the Civil War. Unfortunately, Charles squanders away a lot of the Nenny fortune, and by the mid-1870s, Charles is filing bankruptcy. But some other notable Nennys here, we have Ann Nenny, one of Charles P. Nenny's children. She died fairly young in 1851. And then over here, Lucy Ellen Snap. She was Lucy Nenny before she married Dr. Snap. She died young in 1856. And interestingly enough, right next to her is Mr. Samuel Snap. He was a doctor in Russellville in the 1850s and 60s, and he eventually served as a surgeon in the Confederate Army. And he's listed as living with the Nenny family in 1860. But all in all, the Nenny line is fairly prevalent, very wealthy. They had quite a bit of land. By the height of the Nenny power in the 1850s, the Nennys had almost 1,000 acres in Russellville, Tennessee.
So when I was going to school, we didn't learn that one of the most historic churches in the state, arguably, is in our backyard. We also didn't learn of James Taylor or Franklin W. Taylor over there. So James Taylor was a very prominent businessman in his day. Obviously, this is only half of some of what he done, not all of it. F.W. Taylor, before I get to F.W., James Taylor one of the things he did was slave trading, and he had a big house over in Jefferson County. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a very large mansion. Then over here we have F.W. Taylor. Now most of the Taylors that are in Tennessee came through our area in a house called Greenwood. That sat just up above the Longstreet Museum, right there where East Industrial Park is. I have posted pictures of it to my page, so feel free to look them up. The house was tore down to make way for the East Industrial Park. Long story short, F.W. Taylor was such a rich man that he had a safe in that house with all of his jewels and money and bonds and certificates in there, that when he died, his sons wouldn't even touch it. And when they sold and tore down the house, they still couldn't open that safe, and nobody really knows where it went.